The following podcast is a presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Bizzong.
Bizzong.
Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong.
Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong.
This is Bizzong, the weird and wacky fiction podcast. With me, your host, Mr. Frank. What's going on, Zongers? Hope you're doing well, ready to strap in and get into another episode of the Big Bizzong Show, because I've got a return guest for you this week. It's been a while since he's been on the show, and the last time he was on the show, it was like he was making his writing debut, so to speak, with his first book, which was also his first short story collection. That did very well. It came out with Nihilism Revised, and it was called My Birth and Other Regrets. It did very well, like I said, and now he's back following up with a new book, out this time from Hybrid Sequence Media, and it is called Snail Butter. It sounds like a great coming-of-age, weird-ass, bizarro tale. Of course, something you would expect that Hybrid Sequence Media would put out. I definitely dig the sound of it, but we're going to get into the interview this week with the author of Snail Butter. I'm talking about, of course, Ben Fitz. Ben first came on my radar with the Rock and Roll Horror Zine, which I snuck a few stories into a couple of issues of that. And then soon thereafter, he started getting himself published. And My Birth and Other Regrets was a big book for him, very well received, and now he's able to follow this up with his first long-form fiction book called Snail Butter. So we're going to get into it, catch up on everything else we've missed in the time since Ben was last on the show. Well, of course, we'll discuss the zines and everything like that again, but of course, we want to spotlight Snail Butter out and available now. So let's get into the Bizzong interview of the mean zine rock and roll dream, the one and only Mr. Ben Fitz. Give us the gong. It is my pleasure to welcome back to Bizzong this week a guest. It's been a while since he's been on, but man, he's had quite a bit of stuff happen in that time, and we're going to dig into it and unpack it all. So please welcome back to Bizzong once again, the one and only Mr. Ben Fitz. Ben, welcome back to Bizzong.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you back. You've got a new book out, which is why you've come to us here to talk about it all. So, let's dig right in to the brand spanking new book called Snail Butter from Hybrid Sequence Media. Tell me what Snail Butter is all about.
Yeah, so it's second book, my first novella length thing. My last book was a short story collection, and I kind of wanted to change gears after that and focus on longer storytelling. So this book is a pretty bonkers, balls to the wall, bizarro comedy, horror, mishmash. But really at its heart was, when I was a kid, there was a very specific kind of YA novel they were really pushing on us that was all about growing up in high school friendships. And then there were also these really, really campy Goosebumps era, Goosebumps-esque kind of YA juvenile fiction they were pushing on us. And if you were in school in the late 2000s, early 2010s, it's you couldn't really avoid this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So what I kind of wanted to do was I wanted to make a book that was somewhat of a satire of those books, but with the ideal audience in my head being people who are kind of my age now, who are on the other side of all that.
Okay.
So it's meant for adults. It's not all YA, and it's very violent. A lot of swear words, a lot of stuff like that. But it's also very much kind of parodying these tropes that were really kind of big in these books that were a big part of people my age's childhood.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I also wanted to make sure that you didn't have to be from that window of being a kid to enjoy it. So I had and one of the things I did in the revisions was I had other people kind of look at it and just kind of made sure that everything still made sense. Jokes weren't lost. The story still holds up as a weird, bizarro story, even without any of that, of those cultural touchstones. And then if you were in my age group within maybe plus or minus 5 years, there's this whole other extra layer of jokes that you can pick up on.
Very interesting. I talked to a lot of writers that are heavily influenced by, Goosebumps and the likes. but they usually have a very high reverence for the Goosebumps
Yeah.
stuff. And
I love Goosebumps too. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say you almost sound like you had a little bee in your bonnet over the Goosebumps. It wasn't quite
Goosebumps. I liked. It was the other ones that I didn't like as much, but I thought it was kind of funny that the stuff that was like, this is what the teachers would give us, that was all over the school libraries, was either these very, very like over kind of melodramatic high school dramas like John Green and the many, many followers of John Green, or it was like Goosebumps and the kind of knockoff Goosebumps that were also very kind of campy horror. So I was very much in that latter group of like fan-wise, but I just found it so funny that was kind of like the binary of what was presented to us as readers at that age. So I kind of knew when I wanted to kind of like parody this a little bit and kind of both kind of make fun of it while also kind of having like a nostalgic homage to my childhood reading. That real kind of disconnect and the combining of the two was where the heart of like the humor would be, at least in terms of like the parody. And then like I said before, I made sure to make sure the story holds up on its own, even if you don't get any of the satire.
Yeah, and I get it, and I guess there is too, like even Goosebumps, you know, as that goes on and on, there is a sort of, like you said, a formula to the sort of things, and
yeah, very much.
And of course, you know, it's for kids and everything. But it's like once they start pumping them out and realize it's a moneymaker, there's a level of cheesiness comes to, you know, any of those titles, and specifically the more you get away from or get to the copycats, the really cheesier it gets. So
yeah,
I dig. Is that what you're playing to more so than anything with this? You know, in your homage to is to the cheesiness of it.
Yeah, it's very much it's also like the way a lot of these to the cheesiness, but also I think because I was reading these kind of horror, like children's horror at a young age, I think it's part of the reason why when I first picked up Bizarro fiction, I just kind of got it. Because like the stuff was really, really weird. Like they would never try and sell these stories to adults on anywhere near the scale they successfully sold it to children. So like that weirdness was very much kind of, I think, ingrained in me from a young age. Even like so when I came across Bizarro fiction, was like reading books by like Danger Slater or Carlton Mellick, I was like, oh, this is bringing me back. So that was part of it too, was leading into both the cheesiness, but also just the how weird that stuff was. So like I've written like quite a bit of Bizarro. It's like a big part of what I do. But this is still like the weirdest thing I've written probably, and it's partially because I was like kind of mimicking and paying homage while also parodying these tropes that I was introduced to at a young age from these like really, really like commercially successful stuff, even if they were meant for children.
So when you knew you wanted to approach this, you know, with that feel to it, that tone to it, did you also know, because of the, you know, you're dealing with that Goosebumps sort of an homage, that it would have a sort of coming of age feel to it? Or was it like, I want to write a coming of age thing and that tone fits it best?
Right. I might actually have to think about that. So the opening paragraph, I wrote this a little bit before the start of the pandemic. So it's back when I was still out and about. So the opening paragraph, I think I was walking home from work and it just kind of came to my head, and I just kind of sat down and like typed it out on my phone. So from there, then I was kind of playing with it. And at first I thought it was just going to be a short story, and then just kind of kept going and going. And then I just kind of realized maybe like a third of the way through it that I was actually looking at like a novella length story. So I think it actually happened a little bit more organically. And I was kind of a lot of those like little influences and even a lot of the homages and like the satire element, I think at least in the beginning, was somewhat subconscious. So that was a big part of my editing and my revising and my ultimately making it the coherent, presentable, or hopefully book it is now, was going back and picking up on those themes and having more of like a clear mission statement in my head with what I was trying to do with this book. Mm-hmm. So I can't actually give you a nice, neat answer on which part of it came first. They kind of came together. And then in the editing process, I brought them to the forefront. In the very first draft, they were very much kind of like background noise to the story.
Gotcha. Understand now. That'll answer it sufficiently.
Okay.
And also for you though, Snail Butter is I might be wrong, but I think this is your longest piece of continuous fiction to date. Like,
yeah,
you're normally the short story kind of guy. You have a really a robust collection of short stories out there. So was that something else too when you sat down and started this? Like you said, you sort of as you wrote it, it just kind of kept growing in size. Did you kind of feel like maybe, you're ready for the longer thing, or was it just writing it, this is all of a sudden, this is the one that's long fiction?
Yeah, somewhere in the middle. I'd been wanting to tackle long fiction for like a while, and so after I put out my like first collection of short stories, I thought about just like putting together another collection and then trying to ship that around, but I decided I wanted to change forms a little bit and work on longer fiction. So I took a few shots that didn't really get off the ground. I took a few shots that I totally finished the book, but it was bad, so no one else really never needed to read it. So then this was the one that, weirdly enough, I didn't expect to be a long fiction work. I thought it was just kind of be a long short story. I was kind of maybe eyeballing it around 6,000 words when I first started writing it. It ended up being 41,000, so like long for a novella. And so somewhere kind of I think about a third of the way through, like I said earlier, I realized, okay, I have a big story on my hands. Let me actually, and I liked what I had, so let me like actually get this one all to the end and make it presentable to other humans. So I didn't, so somewhere in between, I guess. I've been wanting to do long form for a while, and this just happened to be the story that got me there.
Very cool. Now, as I said earlier, it is published through Hybrid Sequence Media. They've been putting out some great stuff, and they seem to be even ramping up their output lately. What made you approach them? Did you approach them? Did they approach you? How did that relationship come to be on Snailboat?
Yeah, I approached them. So I worked with them a while back on an anthology they put out, Mr. Miyagi's Saki Serial.
Right.
I think that came out about a year ago to this day, like roughly maybe 11 months or so. And I had just a real positive experience working with them. I sent them a story I originally published in the Rock and Roll Horror Zine, and it was like a pretty weird, campy story, and they were about it. So Donald, who runs Hybrid Sequence Media, seemed to get what I was going for. So then when I put together Snail Butter, I was looking for places to submit it to. There weren't that many like Bizarro-friendly publishers that were taking submissions at the time. So I kind of made a list of all the ones that were, and Hybrid Sequence Media was right up there. And I'd worked with them. I knew I liked them. I knew I liked working with Donald. I'd seen the books they put out, and I was a fan of the books. And this is weird for Bizarro, to be frank. So I was like, okay, I think Donald will get what I'm going for here. So it was very much a calculated thing on my part. Like, they will get it, they'll put it out, they'll do what I want them to do with it.
Yeah,
and then luckily they did. Yeah, they took it.
And it is, you bring that up, like the sort of open markets any longer for Bizarro. They seem like really, really limited. And previously, like with your short story collection, My Birth and Other Regrets, that was through
that was Nihilism Revised.
Nihilism Revised, who are like now, they're going away now, unfortunately. So like, the market shrinks. And not saying there's bizarre publishers out there, but the amount that are like sort of just open to writers who, maybe aren't already in the stable, that to me seems extremely small and limited anymore. It's sort of frustrating. Did you worry about that, like, as you're writing Snail Butter, like, who might even take this anymore, or even once you're done, was there that concern for you? Or did you even like say like, well, I could just, you do have that DIY spirit. You could have always put it out yourself, even though I obviously your first choice would be to go with a publisher.
Yeah, no, I guess a little bit of yes to everything you said. I was very worried, like, if anyone would actually take it after I put all the time in it. I considered self-publishing, but it's possible, like, 6 months from now, I can put out something else and totally eat these words, but I think I'm going to hold off on doing that for a while. Largely because when I put out the first book, My Birth and Other Regrets, through Nihilism Revised, I noticed that most of the readers also bought, or readers also liked on like the various like book websites like Amazon and Goodreads and stuff, were other Nihilism Revised titles. This is still true to a certain extent now, but it was especially true when it first came out. And it was my first book. I was an unknown quantity. People didn't really know me at all when it came out, which makes sense. They wouldn't really have had much of a weight to at that point.
Right.
But they knew Nihilism was revised. They knew Nihilism Revised. So like they knew the kind of books that publisher was putting out, and they had I still have a pretty devoted base that like reads pretty much everything they put out. So they were buying it because it said Nihilism Revised on it. And that's how I got a lot of the first readers for the book, and a lot of real enthusiastic readers who seem to really enjoy it and left great reviews. So I think for a while I'm still building my base, I think having that name from a publisher, even a small one, that has some sort of base, some sort of established thing, some sort of group of people just kind of watching what they put out is going to help me gather new readers and build my own brand as a writer. And I think maybe down the line, when I've gathered enough, I can maybe start looking to self-publishing because it is smoother and you have a little bit more control and stuff like that. But I'm still getting the people together. I want enough, because the idea is with each book I put out, I might hop around publishers. I might stick to the same publisher a little bit. But the idea is, even if I do hop some publishers, ideally I'm going to bring some readers who checked out the book because of the publisher with me to the next book because they enjoyed it enough. It's not just about the publisher. Like, my name at least means that they might like it, you know?
Right. Yeah. And now that you're building up a catalog of stuff too, like you're building a readership now for yourself. Where you would hope they follow. But that's a great point, though, about any publisher that they do have sort of their own built-in audience that just follows their books. That to me is like one of the biggest attractions to going with a publisher, that I see. And I'm somebody who's to this point still completely 100% self-published, but I would like to change that. But, like you, I don't write straight sort of horror or anything. Like, it's we all know that the weird stuff is kind of a tough sell, in any market. And then, Bizarro itself, publishing wise, is a pretty small, collection of people publishing it. So it's I think it's important to get into publishers so that you can, especially when you're new and like a not known quantity, like you said. So that you can, grab their reach when you may not necessarily have any built-in audience just yet. It works out. And I think it's smart, too, for you to say, like, jumping around publishers, because that just absolutely benefits. And I guess it can also help you, too. Like, you got Nihilism Revised, you got some good sales there, good reaction. You're now Snail Butter, Hybrid Sequence. They see, you got another set of readers now, and those are following you. And now if you go with a third, like, it's just... And a third publisher be like, oh, I already know he's got built-in readers. It's, it makes you that much more attractive, I think, to other publishers. And, of course, if you sell well with your current publisher or past, I'm sure they'd be happy to have you back as well.
Yeah, that's my thought process. We'll see how it goes long run, but yeah.
So do you see in the future, or maybe you're already working on the next thing, is it going to continue being longer form stuff from here?
Well, actually, I have another short story collection ready to go. I haven't started submitting it yet because I was waiting for Snail Butter to come out and kind of do the whole promotion round of that. And you kind of use my energy on that before I start the whole submission process over again. But I do have another collection of about 12 stories or so, like all typed up and proofreaded and in manuscript format, sitting in a dock on my hard drive, just ready to send out once that's the time. So that's going to be the next book I shop around for sure. After that, I'm still kind of deciding what I'm going to do next. So, like, writing-wise, what I'm working on right now is just more short stories for, like, various scenes and anthologies and stuff. I probably don't want to just do, like, short story collection with no mix-up. So I will, once I have an idea that I think I want to see to fruition, I'll probably tackle a long form again. But the next book, well, assuming the next book comes out chronologically, because sometimes that's not how that works out,
right?
Will probably be the short story collection.
So I have to imagine, though, that short stories are just your complete comfort zone. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just your natural inclination is the short story. Is there a sort of comfortable word count range for you in the short story?
I mean, it varies. Short stories are like my favorite as a reader, too, which is why I think they're my favorite to write. It's like if an author I like comes out with a new novel, I'm like excited about it. But when an author I like announces like they're coming out with a new short story collection, that's when I get really excited. So kind of everything in that range where things are kind of below 10,000 words is what I really like to write. I kind of feel like I have several different story length kind of, I don't want to say like templates, but I have like my flash fiction, which is real small, usually like less than 1,000 words. I have my kind of mid-length stories, which are around 2 to 3, 4-ish. And then every now and then I kind of put out like I think technical term is like novelette. Like I had a chat book I released called Jeff Bezos Bub. That was about 7,000 words, and that's like the longest short stories you kind of get before you start crossing over into novella territory. And each one kind of has its own feel, which is why I was like, I'm trying to find the right word, but so I don't want to say template, but it's close, because I feel like when I write those really sparse stories, the pacing needs to be really quick to get through the information.
Right.
So I feel like those almost have like an oral storyteller feel. Like the details that I drop are just kind of the ones that are necessary. Everything kind of moves real quick. It's kind of like I guess like Jeff Strand style prose, even though he writes longer stuff. Then my mid-paced stories are a little bit kind of like that balance. They're usually have like more fleshed out scenes and more of an arc. And then my longer ones are like stylistically could be scenes from a novel. The story isn't as long.
When you wrote Snail Butter, did you sort of apply that, short story writing theory to it? Did it feel like you were writing, just a bunch of short stories together, just they were all about the same thing?
Yeah, kind of actually. So one of the things that kind of the story itself, there is an overarching plot. Like it is a novel. It's not just like a bunch of short stories, but the writing itself is kind of intentionally episodic. So it all happens within a single day. The main character is like navigating a day of school, and everything's tied together. It's all in pursuit of his best friend climbs inside a giant snail shell that he found in his backyard and won't come out, and he's trying to get his friend out of his shell. The metaphor is pretty on the nose, I know.
Yeah.
So then he encounters different things that are all kind of linked. So it's like logical over the course of kind of trying to get this to happen over the day of school. So each thing itself I kind of structured like a short story, but then there's like the connecting things, and it comes back. So like the thing that happened in chapter 3 like is then relevant again in chapter 15.
Right.
But chapter 3 in itself, if you just kind of cut out the end and cut out the beginning, could almost seem like a short story, even if like some stuff won't make sense.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes, because I know when I was like making the leap from the short story to the writing longer form, that was sort of my tactic, was like, well, I just sort of like you said, be episodic, be a little more detailed than I would have in a short story. You gotta like allow it to be long and stuff, and I don't know about you, but sometimes it feels arduous. I think that's where you get the like, this everything I'm writing is shit type of thing, because you're being like just too detailed and too drawn out when you're used to writing the short stories. But then when you're done and you look back and you're like, oh hey, this ain't half bad, and that's that's where I always say you have to like keep a distance. You have to distance yourself from your own work and sort of forget that you wrote it, because your immediate reaction is like, this is garbage.
No, I found once I put things down and like really wait to come back. Let's like Snail Butter itself. I wrote the first draft, put it down for a while, and then when I kind of came back, that's when I really kind of made it into maybe like I want to say like 4 months later, and really kind of came back, and that's when I really made it from these sort of different ideas I'd managed to string together into like a real kind of unified story where everything kind of flowed together. And even if the structure internally was episodic, I don't think it reads super episodic, which I tried hard to kind of edit it and make it blend so that would be the case. So yeah, I found just putting it down really does make all the difference in the world, and I kind of wish I'd been doing that the whole time, because I've been doing that now for some short stories I've been writing, like taking some serious time off between typing the end and then actually going back and changing them and editing them.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's been coming out way better, and I've been getting like better results and submissions and stuff. And I just really wish I'd been doing that the past like 2 years, because I would write, I would finish, and like the next day I'd just go in and make the edits, and then when I felt that was done, I would submit. And I was just going way too fast of a pace for my own good there.
Right. Yeah. Because it's fresh in your head, and you don't have the editor's eye on it. And the biggest thing I find, is when I leave that sort of amount of time, several months, and you go back and read it, and it's almost like you're reading somebody else, because I'm sure over those 4 months you've written other stuff too, that you're closer to, and so it's sort of in a way feels like somebody else's work, and that makes it easier in my mind to do some editing and go through a couple another drafts with it and make it work better, because that's almost sort of like tricking your brain into thinking this is somebody else's work, so I can
as soon as it's kind of been enough time that I don't like remember sitting in front of the computer writing the sentence, that's when I'm able to really like edit.
Yeah, and you get this moment like, oh man, that's good. Like you're almost like you wrote somebody else's. And you're like, no, but I wrote that. That's awesome.
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
Like, that's in my mind too. Like okay, this can go out because I'm having these reactions to this piece of work that I'm into. But I want to circle back too to the short story stuff and the collections, because you're the type of creature, like you said, you prefer reading short story collections and stuff, and to me that's not necessarily what I care for.
Right.
I enjoy those collections, but they're not big for me, and I can't even tell you what it is necessarily that makes me want to pick up a short story collection. Somebody like you and people I know and I'm interested in, but I would probably lean more towards somebody's longer work, and then if I thought well of it enough, I'd want to check out their short stories and not the other way. So to me, it seems like a rougher sell. So, and I'm saying this all as I'm also preparing to release a short story collection. Just, I still write them like a lot. So I had a bunch sitting around like, okay, this could make up a good, collection of stuff and compile them and everything. And I'm like, all right, I can do another. I don't know why it felt like time for me, because my very first book was a short story collection.
Oh, really?
And yeah, just sort of, on that path of, right, I've written a bunch of short stories and they got into anthologies, and now I have, a bunch that I can actually collect for myself and put out myself as my first book. And then once I did that, I'm like, oh, I really don't, this ain't my thing. Like I want to write longer stuff. And that's like where I took that journey into the longer stuff. And really from that first longer book, The Death Gets a Book on, that's, all I've written. But I'm always, part of giving yourself some space between things writing is like when I write a long thing, 50, 60,000 words, I take the break for a month or so and write short stories in between and sort of cleanse my palette, so I'm never not writing except if I'm editing. But yeah, that's how or if I'm stuck on something long, that's another thing I'll do. I'll go write a couple of short stories or two to kind of give myself a moment with the longer book where I'm in a corner and I don't know what to do with it. And, instead of racking my brain and spinning my wheels, I'm like, oh, I'll just side shift here and write some short stuff and just, because that's what I find now when I write short stuff is that it's sort of my playground time. And like the short stuff I've been writing the last year or so has been like very playful, very experimental in style and just doing really, really different things. And that's also like, I enjoyed a lot of it, and I'm like, well, I want to put some of this stuff out. People don't see this stuff going on, and it's very different from my long work. But yeah, it's like, it seems like I guess where I shy away from it is because me as a reader, I don't appreciate them. But that's what you were looking for. So you, as a marketing thing, you don't see like a bigger hurdle to putting out short story collections, no?
Well, I think unfortunately for me, as most people kind of agree with you, is short stories are less popular. Yeah, like I've always just kind of loved them. Like I'm pretty ADD. So like many of my favorite books are novels. Like don't get me wrong, but I like love jumping from one idea to the next. I love jumping from a set of characters to the next, and I think with art and entertainment in general, I just like stuff that's like short and punchy. Like I love punk rock. I like comic books. I like short movies. I love those like Adult Swim series where every episode's like 10 minutes. I just like moving on to the next thing, I guess.
Yeah.
So for me, I just love short story collections because if I pick up a 400-page novel, it can be an awesome story. Don't get me wrong, but essentially I'm getting one big story. I'm getting one set of events. I'm getting one character or however many main characters or narrators there are in that novel. If I pick up a 400-page short story collection, I'm probably getting like 20 of those.
Right.
So for me, I just like love going through as many ideas as possible. So I think that's when I started writing initially. It was just short stories was what I was writing because that was my favorite thing to read. It wasn't actually until I was doing it for maybe like seriously for like a couple of years I even really started thinking about writing novels or novellas or anything of that longer length. So for me, it made sense that I was writing what I was writing. But yeah, it's harder to market. It's way harder to get published because we were talking before about the scarcity of Bizarro publishers. Mm-hmm. But what's even rarer is Bizarro publishers that are open to unsolicited short story collections.
Yeah.
There's like 2,
usually,
maybe 3.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
usually like a specific caveat, like what we're not looking for. Short story collections.
Yeah, and like most of the real big Bizarro publishers, like Eraserhead, Bizarro Pulp Press, all those ones, like they straight up just don't take them if they're not solicited. So
yeah,
if I ever want to get a short story collection with any of them, I have to like just be sending it to places that do accept non-solicited ones and building up a name to the point that someone like Eraserhead would be like, okay, you want to work with us, and that's I guess in Bizarro that's like the ultimate goal. So
yeah,
see if I get there, you know.
It does seem like you got to give them the longer thing. They'll take the chance on the longer thing first, and if it does well for them, they'll probably go, "What else you got?" And probably half the time, I'm like, "Well, I got enough stuff if you want for making a short story collection." And whether they go for that or not, that seems to be like the root of getting one out. Generally.
Well, I guess what I will say though, in terms of like not collections, is there are a lot more opportunities for like singular short stories. So even before I had a book together, I think I really started like establishing whatever presence I established through just kind of getting short stories in zines and anthologies, and then I was also running my own zines for a while that put out short stories with other writers. So they are a really, really good way to get your foot kind of in the door in like those like small press kind of circles. Because if you pick up like a magazine or anthology or zine, because you know like 2 or 3 writers in it, and you read like another 10 stories from writers that are totally new, if that person likes your story, then all of a sudden you're a writer on their radar. So they are really, really great for that. But then kind of when you take that leap from like single stories placed to like selling books, that's when it becomes way harder to push a short story collection than a novel or novella, even if I think it's way easier to get a start pushing short stories.
Yeah, it's like you said, the zine, the anthology sort of market there, and to me of late it seems there's a swing back towards. I'm seeing more anthologies, more anthology calls, and more anthologies being published. It seemed for a while that was kind of going away, but now making a bit of a comeback here. I guess there's a natural ebb and flow to those things too. Because again, everything that I've dealt with over the years in publishing is like, I don't know. It's like the new publishers put those out, and then they find out those are tough sells. Unless you have a really killer sort of a concept to it or something that works, or maybe some even with bigger names, but they're always a harder sell. And then, everybody goes to the novels, the novellas to publish regularly, but they are, if there's anything I like too, it's, I'd rather go for an anthology where there's a couple of writers, like you said, that I know, and I would like, lean toward that more than a short story. A short story collection I'm going to read if I already kind of know the writer and appreciate their stuff. That's when I'm going to, I'm not taking a chance on a writer necessarily with a short story collection as the first thing. I think that would be a rare occasion. But, again, if that's where your comfort zone is, that's what you write. There's plenty of writers who have made their names just being short story writers and having collections and being in magazines and, just all over the place, nothing but short stories. So, it's not an impossible thing to do. And there are.
Oh, it's not. Yeah.
And of course, like you said, like you just appreciate them on your own. So, I find nothing absolutely wrong with it. Just me personally, I just don't gravitate towards them necessarily. But the other thing I kind of do like, and I mean, the last time you were on, it was a big part of our discussion is the zines, because you were putting out the rock and roll horror zine. There were 6 issues of those, and now you also have like a bunch of chapbooks. You just mentioned one. So is that still something in your repertoire here, like putting out these little chapbooks or zines?
Yeah, I'm still doing them, not the pace I was before. So I started doing the rock and roll horror zine and some of these other kind of one-off zines I was doing when I was still like an undergrad in college, just about like 20 or 21. And it was partially a way for me to just kind of have like a fun creative project that was all my own and was kind of divorced from my schoolwork in any way. But it was also a way for me to kind of establish myself in the scene a little bit, because I was putting out these stories with like these zines with 5 or 6 stories in them, and I would sneak my own stories in there. And then I'd get some writers who were ahead of me, and they'd be like, hey, I got a story in this, everyone check it out. And everyone who checked it out also saw my story. So that was actually, I think, worked out pretty well for me. It's one of ways in which I think when my short story collection came out, people like a fair amount of people I think who actually bought it in the beginning were people who knew me from the rock and roll horror scene. So that was really fun, and I'm glad I did it. But then, I graduated college, stopped living on a campus, and started living on an apartment I had to pay rent for, and joined the workforce. And the truth was, something had to give a little bit. So I was still doing the writing. I was still like in a band and stuff, and I was working and everything. And so the zines kind of fell out of the wayside a little bit. So I've been putting off one-off zines and chapbooks when I get a chance, but doing like the bi-monthly issues and like reading submissions, I just didn't. I really tried at first, and it just wasn't happening. So well, maybe at some point when things calm down a little bit, I'll get back to it. But like my main income at this point is like music and teaching music. So it's very much like a gig economy that I have chosen to undertake. So spare time like that, it's hard to do a thing like going through a slush pile of submissions because it's such a time suck, and my time is so limited these days.
Yeah, I mean, anybody that is able to run any kind of publishing, whether it's a zine or an independent publisher, and write at the same time, those people are insane, in my mind. Because
and then for me at least, music's only like writing's only like half of what I do creatively. I'm in a band, we play shows, we're signed to record labels, so like all the time suck I have with this whole writing, editing world, it's then this whole other thing that's as much, if not more, of my time. So I really picked carefully which thing I had to kind of put down for a little bit, and ultimately it just was the zines. But I'm planning getting back to it. I still run the Etsy shop. I still like sell them, and when people order them, I still print them up and ship them to their house. But it's been last one I put out, I think, was the Jeff Bezos Above chat book, and that would have been like July 2020, so it's almost a full year now.
Okay, yeah, but they're not off the table either. Do you see doing maybe Rock and Roll Horror Zine is defunct now, but like getting back into another zine series, or it's probably not even a thought in your head at the moment.
Definitely someday. Like I have thought about it, yeah. Definitely someday, just not right now.
But you'll still move copies of those things.
Yeah, because I make them myself. That's one of the awesome things about zines. I just make them, print them up at home, staple them, and ship them out. So nothing I have really goes out of stock. I guess the only exception being some of the chapbooks I make that were actually produced by someone else.
Okay.
It's like I have one chapbook that Ira Rat and Filthy Loot actually, like they're the ones who printed it up. Like it's a Filthy Loot chapbook. So I only have the amount that Ira printed and then gave me.
Oh, the scary
so that
stories
one's,
to read in the dark one, or something.
Yeah. So I had a story in the very first one of those.
Yeah.
And then the last one, it came with like the main one, and then my chapbook was like an extra story that like came with it if you bought volume. I think it was 3. So those ones are limited. So when those sell out, they're gone forever.
Yeah.
And one of my earlier chapbooks was put out by a different maker. It was a zine called Bushwhacker Zine, like a feminist zine, and my story was like an insert if you bought the copy. So like those actually sold out a while ago because they only made so many.
Wow, so you have like super limited edition zine stuff out there.
Yeah, I do. Like super limited, because the ones I make I can print up as much as I can until I run out of ink and have to go buy more ink. But the ones that other people make and like we're in charge of, those are however many they decide they wanted to make and distribute.
That's there's something just super sexy about that, you know what I mean? To me, that's like fuck Thunderstorm books, like, that to me is like a bigger rarity. I would imagine.
Yeah, those ones are rare. If at any point I become anything, those might be like items to find.
Yeah, and it would be like such a punk rock sort of thing to have, it's like when you had somebody's like demo tape, the band's demo tape, and before they hit or something like that. That's pretty cool. I dig that. So that stuff again. It's not off the table for you, but it's extremely back burner right now. You're just gonna keep. I guess your focus is putting publishing out, publishing books with publishers. That seems to be your focus right now as far as books go.
Yeah, that was kind of like the logical next step for me. Was I started out kind of doing the zines. Well, I started out getting my stories placed in other people's zines, and that inspired me to do my own literary zine. And then from there, I started kind of slowly moving up from like small press zines to actual magazines and anthologies. And I still like do tons of zines. I actually got a story coming out, one pretty soon. like I just like love zines. Like I collect them. I go to the bookstores in my area that sell zines. Like look through the zines probably more than look through the books, because something about just finding them and owning the cool ones is just, I think, a thing I'll never stop loving. But then after I was kind of getting myself stories in actual like paperback books, I was like, okay, I want paperback books that are just my stories. So yeah, the next step for me was the books, and I think I'm going to focus on that for a while. And maybe once I feel like I've done enough, that I got that at least out of my system a little bit, maybe I'll start bringing the zines back into the mix.
That's very cool that you have a bookshop to go to that carries zines. That's something I don't have available to me.
Yeah, no, I live in Brooklyn, so
yeah,
it's like hipsters everywhere. There's tons of zines.
I was going to ask you, since you do have your nose to the ground on the zine scene, is it as robust as ever? Is it losing some popularity? How would you categorize a zine scene nowadays?
Yeah, well, it's nowhere near where it was like in the 90s, which was like the heyday for the whole thing.
Right.
But it's like significantly better than it was like 10 years ago. Like 10 years ago, I was too young to like really be aware of this, but based on what people who've been doing it for way longer tell me, mm-hmm. It is having a real comeback. I think partially as things are going more and more digital, people are liking the idea of like small press or small run physical objects, because so much stuff's just kind of like blogs and websites like Tumblr now.
Yeah.
So I think that's had an appeal, but then also because of the internet, it's way easier to actually like distribute and get people like aware of zines in the first place, and also then specifically your zines. So even though I make them all myself and they're physical objects, the vast majority of my sales have been through my Etsy shop, and people just find it online. So I think the internet's done a weird thing of, while at first when it kind of became a big thing, it kind of killed zines. Now it's like this huge ally to the whole movement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because people like, I think, are kind of sick of looking at screens, so they like collecting zines and reading stuff like in these small circulation things. But then also it's just so much easier to get them distributed and to get people like aware of what you're doing.
I know. I was pretty impressed where at one point for the rock and roll horror zine, one of the issues had a review in a zine that spotlighted other zines. To me, that was pretty freaking awesome.
Quite a few of those. I think the biggest review I got was in I don't know if you know Razor Cake. It's like that real significant punk scene. It's going on for ages. They reviewed one of the issues in it.
And was that like
cool.
Purely organic? Like they just because they're seeing the zines going on and let me check this out, or was it something you like kind of submitted to get spotlighted?
Yeah. I sent them an issue in the mail in a nice letter. It said, "Please review this."
Very cool. Hey, man, there ain't nothing wrong with that at all. Does that seem to help too? I guess that's something you got to grow, is your own like little reputation within the zine scene, right?
Yeah, it did. And I found a lot of crossover between like the zines and my writing. So like when my first book came out, I was really just kind of known as a zine person between my own zines, and most of the stories in the book were originally published in zines. I think maybe like one of them at that point in my writing was like in an actual anthology, maybe one or two. So pretty much if you like skip to the back of the book where it has the story credits, it's just like this scene. But like the book did actually, like, it's a small Bizarro book, so it's not like it did anything amazing, but it did better than I was afraid it might. So and I think a lot of those early readers were people who just like were into zines and kind of knew my name around. So maybe they'd read the Rock and Roll Horror Zine, or they'd read some other zines that I had stories in.
Yeah.
So there really was like at least in terms of readership, a lot of cross pollination after that. And then when my book came out, I found like my zine sales upticked, because I think people were checking out the book and then just kind of seeing what else was up with me, and it mentions the zines in the bio in the back. So I think then some people were going to the Etsy shop and my personal website and like seeing them and then being like, oh, that one looks cool. Let me check that one out.
Yeah, that's cool. And it would seem to me harder to like, I guess you kind of said it was kind of a concern reprinting stuff that had been out in zines in a book, like that they would, like, well, I've already read all those things. I really want the new stuff, but they follow. I could see it feeding back where you mention it in the book, these zines, and then people want those like sort of physical tokens, even if maybe they have read the stories that are in those zines, but then, you're kind of getting something pretty special. That's a big thing that I dig about the zines. You're getting something, so DIY, but it's like, it's like, when you make a card for your mother, like, it's the cheesiest thing, but your mother loves it because it's something physical that you put your effort into, and you get this token of appreciation. That's sort of what zines, represent to me and what I dig about them. But
sorry, something else I'm gonna say though real quick. Because I think one of the things with zines that's cool is like a lot of them are very small market.
Yeah.
So I had a bunch of stories published. I think by the time the collection came out, even if somebody picked up the collection because they knew of like one story I published and they liked it enough to check out the name, it was unlikely they'd come across two of those different zines that the stories had originally been published in. Because I think of like a writer like Wrath James White, like he's a great writer, no shame, but or no shade, but like he's in like every extreme horror anthology that comes out now. So if you're like a big reader of extreme horror and you get these anthologies, it's possible you might not bother getting his collections when they come out because there's a good chance you've already read like every story in it. I'm not like it's not like I did research on this. It's possible he like has new stories in there, so I'm not saying don't buy his anthologies or his collections. I'm just using an example, but I could see like that happening to people. But for me, I think it was because I think I was getting these readers from these people who opened up like one zine and saw one story of mine. So it's not like it's the same market I was just constantly putting stuff out into because each zine had its own reach and not that much crossover between the different people it hit, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate, that, that's sort of what I figured, somebody might know you from this zine or have a story like the story in this, but they don't necessarily know the whole body of your work. So this is an opportunity for them to, get it all in one spot. And the Wrath James White example is great, is a great point. That's, in the short story collection I'm about to release, there's 3 stories that were in anthologies previously, and 2 of those anthologies are out of print. So that made me like super comfortable. Like these are like 5-year-old things, and it's not available now. So people who may like get into my stuff now, there's a good chance they haven't read those, by and large. So like that made me real comfortable. And the other one again is just old, and even though the book's still there, like nobody pays attention to it anymore. So I think I have a lot of new readership since then, and a lot of readership that hasn't read those stories yet. So I felt okay about doing that. And of course, I'm putting all kinds of brand new stuff in there as well to appeal to everybody. So that anybody accidentally read a story, read a story, happened to read a story from back then, it's like a no harm, no foul. And maybe if you're crazy enough to read it again, then God bless you. But yeah, that was sort of an important thing to me, is like, or a concern of mine doing that, but I felt comfortable being like that the books are out of print now, and there's no chance of, I read that there. I think there's a small chance of that.
Yeah. I found that as a reader, when that happens, it's not like the biggest deal. Like, I read the new Jeff Strand short story collection, and I actually already read several of them from the original publications. Yeah. But like, I didn't mind reading them again. Like, I like his stuff enough. I bought the book,
Yeah, I just hate when like I will pick up like some sort of anthology and say there's a Stephen King story in there. Like I've read this. This is in 2 other anthologies. No, those are annoying.
I guess that's a little different.
Yeah, but it's also Stephen King, so the chance of coming across his stuff is a lot easier than coming across a Ben Fitz story over and over and over again. But that's really cool. But yeah, like, so that are you seeing it is a good chance of this new short story collection coming out this year? I know you're still shopping for a publisher, so I guess there's no.
Yeah, no, I haven't really started shopping for a publisher yet. I just Stay Louder just came out, so like I was really waiting kind of until that was out and like focusing my energy on letting people know about this new book, and then I was probably gonna start that pretty soon. So yeah, I can't really start speculating on the release date. Like hopefully it's the next book that comes out. If it's not the next book that comes out, it probably means either no one wants it or I'm encountering some other issue. But yeah, hopefully it's the next one, but we'll see. I really don't know when it's gonna happen. My first short collection, My Birth and Other Regrets, came out like remarkably fast. I put together the manuscript for it around like June 1st-ish. I sent it to SE over at Nylum's Revised, and like 2 weeks later they sent me a contract.
Wow, man.
And then the book came out like a month after, or maybe 2 months after that. So like that was unusually quick turnaround, which gave me a really unrealistic expectation of how the publishing world worked.
Yeah.
So now, yeah, so like Hybrid Sequence Media is great, but they're just like a slower moving operation. Like I got the acceptance with them around, I want to say like October 2020, and it's just out now, which is totally cool. They took their time and did it really well.
Yeah.
And
even
not that Atlas Revised didn't, but yeah, just different paces.
Yeah, and
So,
I was
like,
gonna say even
yeah.
then, like October to now, it might be pretty quick by a lot of people's standards
It
as well.
probably is. Yeah, it's my last expectation was like 2.5 months. So
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know when it's gonna come out. I soon would be awesome, but we'll see what happens.
So with that sort of like your unreasonable expectation of the publishing process and the speed at which it runs, coupled with having these books ready to go, is it and that you also are a DIY kind of guy with your zines and your chapbooks, do you see yourself trying the self-publishing model at all?
Yeah, I think I will eventually. With the chapbooks and like that one, I did like one Kindle one shot like a while back, kind of early in the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So the chapbooks and stuff and the zines, I think are my kind of self-publishing. For the books themselves, I'm probably gonna want to hold off.
Right.
And just like work with more publishers, just kind of get their bases, like I talked about earlier, and just kind of establish myself a bit. It's like, yeah, 'cause when you publish a book, self-publish it, like you're entirely responsible for bringing people to it. So it's really just like your name that's selling. You don't get like that. You don't get that free audience of people who really like that publisher. And then also it's like expensive, and I haven't done this before, so I'm still figuring out the publishing industry in general. So I don't really know what I'm doing. So probably someday, but I'm just taking a beat, letting professionals who know what they're doing do it for a while. I think it's the plan.
There ain't nothing wrong with that. The one last thing I wanted to touch on too, you brought up that you're a musician in a band, tour, doing shows, and you got albums and all that stuff out. Are you able to marry the music and the books in any way? Like, do you sell books at shows? Does the writing somehow, feed songs? Is there any sort of like crossover, one feeding the other there between the two?
Yeah, totally. I think some of the people who like know me from my writing have like checked out the band because of it, and vice versa. So just in terms of marketing, that helps. We haven't been doing a ton of shows recently because of the pandemic, but we actually have some coming up now for the first time, which is pretty exciting because things are coming back. Everyone's been vaccinated, at least in New York State.
Yep.
So I'm totally planning on selling books and zines at the shows when that kind of comes back. So I found like in terms of like brand and cross promotion, there has been some. And I've done like I did like an interview at a different podcast a little bit ago, which like the podcast was really equal parts about my writing and the band. So stuff like that really did kind of help work out because it's all connected. Like a lot of my writing is about music.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think, at least in terms of like building a brand as a writer and I guess just as a creative person, there is definitely crossover. Yeah, so it all works out.
That's cool. I mean, that's just to me, I can't say I've ever seen somebody from a band marketing, selling their books at the merch stand, but I mean,
I'm
it
pretty
seems
sure.
like.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Nathan Carson does that at Witch Mountain shows. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just sort of meant like my own going to shows experience. Like,
oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Where I would totally expect Nathan Carson to do that, or oh God, Michael Allen Rose. I'm sure does the same thing as well. Just a couple of writers that are also playing bands that come to mind. But yeah, I wouldn't know how to quantify, how well that would market like to, somebody at a show and then like, oh, well, this guy writes books too. I mean, I'm sure any opportunity to put your book out there in any situation is beneficial. So.
Yeah. So I guess I'd say like, it's not like, bringing your books to like a book show or like a horror convention or something where like the idea is to go there and buy that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But
like if you're playing let's say you're playing like a DIY show, there's like 4 bands on the bill. Every single band's got like a stack of records and a stack of shirts. And you've also got this other like kind of unusual item that stands out. So in our case, it can be like books and zines. I know some other bands who actually get weird merch they don't really expect to sell, but they expect it to bring people to the merch stand. It's like some bands will have like lingerie and stuff with the band logo on it, and like if you ask them about it, they'll be like, "Yeah, we sold like 2," but it gets like people in the thing to our table instead of the other tables because they like, "What's that?" and they buy a record. So it does stand out, and So it's not like but I got the stuff at my house, and so if I'm bringing my amp and my pedals and 2 guitars and the band merch, I can just bring my books. And if I sell one, that's awesome. And if I don't, like,
no
so
harm,
what?
no foul. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I guess obviously your bandmates, it doesn't bother them. Like you're cutting into our purse.
Yeah,
man.
no, I checked with them first. They're like, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, you're not at that level where the egos and we're so much money rolling in, and we each gotta roll them out. And fuck that, you can't have any more space on this merchandise.
Yeah, no, the money the band makes just goes right back into the band. It's not really about that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, but then no, that's cool that they are cool with that, because you could see maybe somebody being like, well, is the $20 over the band or to your book, type of thing.
Yeah, no, that hasn't been an issue.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I hope I haven't put ideas in their heads. What's the band name? You should promote the band name while you're on the show.
Didn't realize I didn't say that. Yeah, we're called War Honey. We got a vinyl record coming out this summer, a vinyl press of our EP through Handstand Records. The release date isn't set yet, but it's going to be probably pretty soon.
Very cool. How would you categorize the music?
It's like indie rock. Not as heavy as the stuff I was doing last time we talked. It's kind of like it's like the description we usually use for like social media is we write sad songs with lots of reverb. I think that gets the message across.
Dig it. I definitely dig it. Ben, it's been a pleasure having you back on Bizzong. It's been too long, but you've got a lot accomplished in that time. Like you said, thank God we're getting out of pandemic here. You're able to get back out on the road, bring your music, bring your books to the masses. I'm sure they're all eager and hungry for music and literature that you're going to bring, no doubt, with some snail butter to dip it into. I'm definitely looking forward. I've got my copy of Snail Butter. I hope I can get to it soon. Absolutely. I mean, I love the sound of the concept of it. And, as we sort of started talking, early on in the show about the Bizarro markets being small, I think that translates into the amount of Bizarro books that seem to be out there lately. It just doesn't seem to be quite enough. I know I'm trying to do the show, and if you've been paying attention, I'm talking to a lot of extreme horror writers lately.
Yeah.
And there's
real
sort of
big,
a reason for that, as much as I love that stuff, but there's just not enough, Bizarro seems to be happening. Not that it isn't, but it's just not as robust as it once was a few years back. So hopefully, as long as we got vanguards out there, you keeping the spirit alive, saying screw it, and we're gonna just keep publishing this stuff and writing this stuff. I think that is great. That's what's gonna keep it alive, and like everything, it's cyclic, and I'm sure Bizarro will be robust once again, hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah, hopefully. Thanks so much for having me.
There he is, Zongers, Ben Fitz and his snail butter. Have you ever had escargot, Zongers? I've never tried it myself. I try a lot of weird things, but for some reason I just can't pull the trigger on the snail, on the escargot. So I don't know. It's like you said, it's a bit on the nose. The getting a kid to come out of his shell, and I don't know. Does snail butter help them little snails come out of that shell? Kind of lube them up so you can pop them out with your little snail fork? I don't know how that works, Zongers. Maybe you know better than I do. Either way, I think that title is really fun and great, kind of perfect for a Bizarro book. And yeah, I'm glad that there is another Bizarro book out. They are coming out. They're still out there, but they're just not as robust as they once were. So I'm hoping that, Ben's there on the front line, still putting out Bizarro, letting people know it's there. And maybe I'm sure it's all cyclic. And this will, of course, the South will rise again. The Bizarro will rise again. That type of thing. And it's going to be guys like Ben Fitz that just keep its spirit and its stories alive. So that's all I've got for you fine Zongers this week on the Bizzong. But you bet your bottom Bizzong dollar that I will be back again next week with another great episode of the Big Bizzong Show. And until then, you are now free to go and listen to these other great Project Entertainment Network podcasts.
How do people who make stuff up for a living make stuff up?
New York Times bestseller Jonathan Mayberry told us.
Oprah's book club favorite Sue Miller told us.
You sort of take a character and make some bad things happen.
How'd we get them to do that?
We colored them. just like at a cocktail party, except through your headphones.
Join us every Thursday for the Liars Club Oddcast.
A slightly unhinged podcast where storytellers interview other storytellers.
Available on Project Entertainment Network, iTunes, and everywhere podcasts are heard.
Are you so tired of having your own thoughts? Are you just totally exhausted having your own beliefs on every single thing in the entire world?
Well, don't worry. Here at Your New Opinion, we do the thinking for you.
Join Ryan,
Nick,
and Ben
as the boys debate topics that we probably know nothing about, using every dirty trick they can think of to win.
Everything from if net neutrality is good or bad, to cake versus pie, to who killed JFK.
So if you're looking to never have your own thoughts again, check out Your New Opinion every Friday.
This has been a presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.